All right, thank you. So I'm gonna be reading from the story that's in We're Here. That was also has been in a recent escape pod. Um, and I'm gonna stop at a cliffhanger. Just to warn you about that. So just not to force you to buy the anthology, but it would be really good to support Neon Hemlock. So okay, so this is Maxon's Mardi Gras moon race, and it's Mardi Gras month, so that seems like another good reason to read this. Turtles were built for short-haul lunar prospecting, not treks across the entire face of the moon. But back in 2043, João Silva Henrique, desperate to celebrate Carnival, drove a turtle from Amundsen Crater at the South Pole to Bird Crater at the North Pole. Unsanctioned celebrations of any kind were forbidden in the Chinese stations, but there were enough Brazilians working at the North Pole to make the risk of trekking across unexplored terrain seem worthwhile. Now that Brazil controls Bird Station, it's an annual race, and I am going to win it if I live. We only have the equipment that Zhao had on his first desperate run when he stole his turtle. No moon suits, no long-range radios other than emergency receivers that only work when a rare comm satellite is overhead. Rescue could come too late, like it did in the 52 race. The hangar lights flash, the races start. I kissed my fingers, then touched the picture of Bernardino on the dashboard, the one from last year's Carnival, before slowly pressing my foot on the accelerator, hanging back as 50 racers flow from the airlock and stay in a tight peloton along the road to Amundsen Crater's wall, the sun low on the horizon, shining on less than half of our power films. I don't start at the front with all the elite racers, children of the founders of the lunar corporations with someone to sponsor them. They get to spend weeks training on untracked regolith, fine-tuning waste and oxygen recyclers, refreshing the solar voltaic films over the cockpit bubble. They talk about needing to get used to claustrophobia. Me, I'm used to it. This bubble is bigger than the room I share with Bernardino in the Miners' Dome. I want to be at the back so no one follows me. Trekking alone across unexplored terrain is the only hope I have against my better-funded competitors. It also increases my chance of dying. Half the people who try new routes need rescue. Some even have rescue come in time. None of them have placed in the top half of finish times. Race radio squawks when the last straggler is at the top. All clear. See you in 10,000 kilometers. Godspeed. Rooster tails of regolith kip up around me, people gunning motors to get ahead of the pack, but I keep a steady speed. Being in the front this early isn't an advantage. I'm headed farther west to my secret approach to the North Pole, one I found in an old orbital photo. Untrekked routes are risky, but I've spent much time on the surface, racing to get my ice haul to the station so I can head back for more. Colorful dots move across the crater floor below me as I ride across the next crater's rim, while the others take the well-worn route down its slumped wall. Line of sight radio cracks to life. Who's on the ridge? That's DeGraff, who won the 3 of the last 5 races, son of the founder of the Fandiza's greenhouses. I stay silent. Dull red turtle that hasn't seen a paint job in 5 years? Maxon Cojolo. That's Lopez, scion of the Paulo mining group. When the Cruz doesn't win, Lopez does. He came in 33rd last year. Hey, I finished ahead of 4 people that in a year with no fatalities, and my navigation skills got me a 20% raise when I left Paolo mining. That counts as a win for me. What's he playing? That's Zé Almeida, the top woman racer who swears she's going to win this year. The peloton drops out of sight, out of contact as I turn to the antiplano, heading to the 45-degree meridian. The half-illuminated third-quarter Earth hangs over the horizon. It's early evening in Japan. No, that's New Zealand. The Earth is upside down from the way I usually see it. I take a path no one has tried before, a path that doesn't look like it could work, but what I'm doing is closer to Yejiao's spirit than any other racer in the last 10 years. I can't afford to push my batteries to the point where they're useless by the time I reach the finish line. I still need to use my turtle to mine ice in the permanent shadows of the North Pole. I loosen my grip on the steering wheel, and I wiggle my fingers to get the blood circulating. It's exhausting work, looking for the shortest routes around the small craters, trying not to think about any cracks in the cockpit seal, not to think about failing oxygen recyclers or a crack in the still to treat my waste, not to think of all the ways to die out here. The loneliness of this route is an added factor I hadn't considered. There's no chatter on the radio to keep my mind from wandering too far. I keep remembering the turtles of those who've died over the years. Turtles wheels up at the bottom of a crater, tracks disappearing into a dark hole in the slope of a rill, bubbles popped open rather than facing the slow, painful death of CO2 poisoning, left as monuments to the harsh lunar landscape. The timer dings. 10 hours. I cut the power to the wheels and roll another 30 meters before I stopped. It's tempting to eat the Fyodora MRE, but that's a special meal for my last sleep, or maybe when it's clear I'm actually going to win. For now, it's either pão de queijo or generic protein bars from when I don't want to spend as much time eating. When I sleep, I dream of a smooth road over the lunar surface, paved in green glass. When I wake, I check the latest race positions. I'm in second to last place. Everyone else is still strung along the traditional well-traversed routes. Names I don't recognize are far ahead. They'll eventually make a mistake in their exhausted state, or they'll get past when they oversleep, or they'll die. Wait, not everyone is taking the standard route. There's someone 5 kilometers behind me, just over the horizon. Lopez. He should be in the peloton with De Cruz, Almeida, and the others. The regolith is packed here, not churned over like it is near home. I adjust degree east of my best heading, hoping to throw him off to my true destination. After my next sleep, Lopez is still 4.8 kilometers behind me, just over the horizon. Now I wish I had something to obscure my tracks. I use the turtle grapple arm to draw a rabbit and a wolf in the regolith and write, "You can't catch me." It looks nothing like the writing in the wet sand in Rio. The regolith compacts without raised edges along the edges of the groove. I trace a line, dodging the tiny craters in front of the rabbit. Hour after hour, day after day, Lopez dogs me, even matching my sleep cycle. The earth creeps higher in the sky as the crescent wanes, and he's still 5 kilometers behind, just over my horizon. I try not to let it bother me, try not to let the uneasiness in my stomach keep me from driving my top speed. Try not to look at the race updates. Try not to worry that he'll win. I have to navigate around a small rill. It might be a 10-kilometer diversion instead of 100 meters across, but I don't trust the slopes. That's how Huang died in '63. Rills mean lava tubes and open pits, ground that could collapse under a turtle's weight. The north end of the rill terminates in a circular shadow, a cave entrance. My next rest stop is southwest of Kepler, the sun directly overhead. I lie down, cover the sun with my hand, and search for the new Earth, its night side facing us. I can see the white lights of Florida and Brazil. Rio shines. Green flashes in streaks from the Antarctic Peninsula up the length of Chile. Another flash. Soon half the earth is bathed in shimmering red and green. Even the light of Porto Alegre are still covered. Aurora, a solar storm hitting the earth. And me. If I can see the solar storm attacking Earth's atmosphere, those high-energy protons and electrons are raining down on me, too. Ionizing the atoms in my body, ripping me apart on a molecular level. Radiation is an ugly way to die. I pull up the mic in case anyone's in range. Warning, warning, auroral activity on Earth, fine shade. Training kicks in. Head to a shadow, a cliff base where you block the sun and 30 degrees to its right. But we're all in the Mary, the smoothest plains on the moon. Where can I hide? Where can anyone hide? The lava tube. That was what, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers behind me? I gun the turtle and spin a sharp 180, using all the solar power and battery reserve I have to follow my track south. Can anyone receive me? The electron storm blocks the radio signal. Lopez won't hear me, even if he's in range. Does he know how much danger he's in? Lopez is probably another 3 kilometers before the rill if he's staying out of sight. Can I risk that much exposure? I don't know, but I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try. Lopez, can you read me? Silence. I see him up ahead. No dusk arcing behind his turtle. Stopped. Lopez! No response. He's sleeping in his reclined seat. I nudge my turtle forward and bump him. He lurches, looks around, eyes wide when he sees me. I point up, then reverse and spin, hoping he'll follow. This time, I gun down the slope, sliding as the regolith shifts under my wheels. The ground slopes down into a cave mouth, barely wide enough for the turtle. I drive in 10 meters. Where the lava tube closes in, my headlights shine on rocks no human eye has ever seen. Lopez's beams shine through my cockpit, and I can see my shadow on the rough wall in front of me. Well, thanks, Maxon, Lopez says over the radio. You didn't have to rescue me. I make a broad shrug. If the tables were turned, you'd have done the same thing, I lie. I'll stop there.
Thank you, David. Next, we're going to hear from Jennifer Hudak. She's our speculative fiction writer whose work can be found in venues such as the Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy, ECO24, the year's best Ecofiction, Strange Horizons, the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet. She is a Nebula Award finalist and a graduate of the Viable Paradise Writers Workshop. Originally from Boston, she now lives with her family in upstate New York, where she teaches yoga, knits pocket-sized animals, and misses the ocean. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm going to be reading the story that I have in the ECO24 anthology, but just a slightly abridged version of it for time. So if you're following along, it won't be exactly the same, but close. Okay. The colonists. I've got a story for you. And I'll let you know right now, it's the absolute truth. You're probably going to think I'm shitting you, but that's okay. Maybe after you've heard it, you'll change your mind. It happened last night. I was sitting here, this very same stool, and down at the end of the bar was the engineer from Colony 8. I didn't believe it either at first. I figured someone who survived Colony 8 would have had better things to do than toss back shots alone at the station bar. But maybe not. Anyone she might have shared a drink with died down there on the planet. The way she was just sitting there, hunched over her glass, staring at nothing, heel kicking against her stool, she looked like someone who's seen some serious shit. So I bought her a drink. I loosened her up with a little small talk, and then, once she was several rounds in, I brought it up. So, Colony 8, huh? Right away, she hardened again. I'm not supposed to talk about it. I slid my chair closer to her, close enough that I could see the tattoos snaking their way up from beneath her sleeves and under her collar. Were you friends with that guy then? What was his name? The one who ended up killing the colony. His name was Eaton, and he didn't kill the colony. It wasn't like that. It wasn't his fault. Well, that's what they're saying on the feeds. The feeds, she said bitterly. They're just looking for clicks. You know that, right? The truth is, it was a tragedy. Tragedy for the colony, yeah, but also for Eaton and for... She cut off and started kicking her heel against her stool again, harder this time. But you know what? It doesn't matter. People are going to believe what they want to believe. They don't care about the other side of the story. I set down my drink, slowly, like I was dealing with a skittish animal. I care, I said. Then I placed my hand on top of hers. She twitched, but she didn't pull away, and that's when I knew I had her. Sure enough, when she started talking, it was like she'd been waiting her whole life for this to get the story off her chest. You have to understand, there was nothing on that planet when we arrived, nothing. Anything we wanted, we had to build for ourselves. None of it came easy, and the stress could just about kill you if you let it. We all did what we needed to find respite. For Eaton, that was Silver. That's what he called her, Silver, because she didn't have a name, and because it suited her. Like the rest of the champignon, she sprouted from the ground like a mushroom, delicate and smooth. They start out so small, just soft little caps, gray and brown, so fragile, so easily broken. Even when they're fully grown, nearly human-sized, their flesh tears like tissue. Our ships crushed thousands when we touched down, thousands more when we started cultivating the land. We didn't know. How could we have known? People step on plants all the time without crying about it. It wasn't until the champignons started migrating away from the settlement that we began to suspect they were sentient. There'd be plans to clear-cut a particular area of forest, and before we could uproot a single tree, all the champignon in the vicinity would have already withered to husks, as if they'd anticipated the settlement's expansion. It was beautiful to watch, if you caught it at the right time, particularly at night when they all glowed in varying shades of orange and green and blue, and their spores drifted like smoke away from the colony. Only Eaton insisted that the champignon could actually speak, and even he really only talked to Silver. It's a mistake to see me as an individual, she told Eaton. She didn't speak out loud. It was more like she sent the words up from the soil into Eaton's nerves, but he heard them all the same. He gazed at her, the way her skin bioluminesced in the moonlight, and said, "Of course you're an individual. You're my Silver." She looked back at him without responding. Eaton didn't mind her silence. He knew he was right. Silver was unique. How else could he recognize her out of all the champignon on the planet? The slope of her cap, the precise ecru shade of her flesh, the delicate, almost erotic flutter of her gills. He trekked out to see her whenever he had a chance. Her cluster grew in virgin land where the champignons still covered the ground, and Eaton walked carefully to avoid stepping on the young ones. Once he reached Silver's cluster, he'd sit himself down and tell her about the malfunctioning distiller, the infection that had claimed a colonist's left index finger, the dense, wet, root-bound soil that made it so difficult to grow crops. Sometimes a man just needs someone who'll listen to him, and Silver did so, patiently, quietly. When Eaton was gone, Silver and her sisters murmured to each other beneath the soil. They were intrigued by the colonists, these beings who were alone and separate from the rest of their kind. separate too from one another, communicating using vocalizations like the flying and skittering creatures who are born and die too quickly for the champignon to know. How lonely, they agreed, to be trapped inside one's own membrane. How frightening to know only what is there in front of you. Did you catch that? That's the problem with stories like these, isn't it? Sometimes you forget that you're listening to a teller, that there's a lot they couldn't possibly have seen. There's no way they could have dipped into all these heads. But I was drunk and it niggled at me and I couldn't let it go. So I asked the engineer, how'd you know all that? How did I know what? She said. What the champ, whatever you call it, were saying to each other. You said only Eaton could hear them and he'd already left. So she just signaled the bartender to give us another pour. Do you want to hear the story or not? And I did. I wanted to hear the story. Don't you? So listen. Eaton knew the rest of us thought he was delusional. We all agreed that the champignons were sentient, but few of us believed they were intelligent. But even beyond that, the champignons were just uncanny. The way they grew, for instance. They popped up overnight, you understand. Sometimes it seemed like they emerged behind our backs when we were looking in another direction. They blanketed the ground anywhere there was a bit of moisture. And they even grew out of the bodies of their planet's insects and mammals. You didn't see that part on the feeds, did you? Intellectually, we understood that this was the way the ecosystem worked, but even Eaton was taken aback the first time he saw an animal decomposing on the forest floor, with champignon bursting from its head, thin stalks like antennae poking out all over. I'm glad I didn't find you in a place like that, Eaton told Silver, gesturing at a fungus prickly corpse, as if his pure, beautiful, soft silver could ever have emerged from such grotesque ground. My cluster has adapted to grow right here, by this tree, Silver responded. Eaton, troubled, uncharacteristically lapsed into silence. The colony was expanding rapidly, and Silver's cluster wasn't far enough from the settlement to remain untouched. They'd eventually need to clear this tree, all these trees. Silver and her sisters would need to move. That sounds heartless, I know, but really it wasn't a huge ask. The planet was big enough for all of us, and the champignons were used to migrating from place to place. That's how they spread so easily. But Eaton was all torn up about it. He couldn't stand the idea of Silver migrating away. He loved her. I told you it was a tragedy, didn't I? The day before the planned excavation of her grove with the equipment charged and ready, Eaton sat on the damp ground next to Silver and told her what he'd come to say. He hadn't asked the colony for permission. He knew what they'd tell him, and he didn't care. He didn't even care about the rest of the champignon. They could all migrate off planet as far as he was concerned. But he wasn't going to let Silver go. He couldn't bear it. Your sisters are going to have to move a bit further away, he told her. We're going to be clearing out some more vegetation, building some new housing, maybe even laying down some roads. Silver most likely already knew this. The champignon knew all kinds of things they shouldn't know. When a tree had been felled, when the soil had been overturned, when another ship had landed on the opposite side of the planet. But all she said was, why? It's kind of what people do, increase and multiply. It was supposed to be a joke, but of course Silver didn't understand. He tried again. More ships will be landing, and eventually, there will be babies, whole generations born right here. He blushed and cleared his throat. Actually, that's kind of why I came here to talk to you. Silver hummed in thought, or maybe in conversation with her sisters. Then she said, we'll spread our spores tonight and migrate our cluster further away. What? No, that's not. I'm saying I'm going to bring you home with me. That way you won't have to, spread anything. You won't have to migrate. You can stay right here. We can stay, Silver said. Or maybe it was a question. It was difficult to make out the inflection of the champignon speech. You, Eaton pointed a trembling finger at Silver, beautiful and precious, who alone among the champignon had captured his heart. I can't keep everyone, but I'm telling you, Silver, you can stay. Silver and her sisters bowed their heads towards each other in silent conference. If they spoke, Eaton couldn't hear it. Look, the rest of your sisters can do what they want, but I'm not letting you go. You're my Silver. You understand? It's already decided. I'm coming back tonight, and I'm going to bring you home. Finally, Silver tilted her cap toward him. Tonight, she agreed. Before returning to the settlement, Eaton let his eyes travel down the length of her stalk, where it coyly disappeared into the soil. He'd always been frustrated that some part of her remained hidden from him, but tonight, he thought, breathing in her earthy scent, tonight she'd belong entirely to him. It was full dark when Eaton returned with his shovel. The champignon glowed in varying shades of green and orange. When he finally saw Silver, she was so beautiful he trembled all over. Her cap, shining orange in the moonlight, swelled like ripe fruit. He inched closer, overcome by a desire to stroke her gills. Still holding the shovel with one hand, he reached for her with the other. I'll try to be as gentle as I can, he said. I know how delicate you are. A tremor beneath the soil, like laughter. As soon as his hand brushed her smooth, fresh flesh, her cap erupted with a small sigh and released glittering spores into the air. Eaton gasped in shock and felt spores tickling the back of his throat. He stumbled back, dropping the shovel. One by one, her sister's caps burst as well. Their spores settled around him in a fungal cloud, invading his eyes and ears and nostrils. He coughed and retched, rubbing at his eyes and clawing at his throat. We won't migrate, Silver said, swaying gently as she expelled another dusty cloud, her cap deflating as Eaton watched. We can stay right here. Already he could feel the spores burrowing deep into his tissue, weaving themselves through his spine, hijacking his nervous system. Already he was walking back to the colony, bristling with fungus. That's disturbing, I said. Then what? We'd ended up in my cabin, of course. I'd planned a whole song and dance about coming here, but she'd followed me without complaint, as if this was where she always knew things were headed. That's it, she said. What more do you want? I don't get it. My words were slurred with drink, and I was annoyed that I even cared so much about her story. The whole point was to get her here, wasn't it? In my cabin, on my bed. And now we were here, but I couldn't let it go. How did you get away when everyone else died down there on the planet? And I still don't understand how you know everything you just told me. She looked different, away from the lights and noise of the bar. Here in the dimness of my cabin, it looked like she emitted her own kind of light, a soft blue glow. Didn't you listen to the story? We know lots of things we shouldn't. I could feel her voice inside me, her words snaking through my arteries like filaments, like thousands of voices speaking together. She smiled then, for the first time that night. It was the strangest smile, like it had just popped up out of nowhere, like she'd become a different person when my back was turned. Something was sticking out of her hair, like tiny antennae. No, like mushrooms. I jerked back from her, but it was already too late. The mushrooms burst, expelling their spores, and my cabin was so small, I couldn't help but breathe them in. You're afraid now, aren't you? You think you understand, but you don't. You're still stuck in your own perspective, just like Eaton was. Just like all the colonists, trapped inside their own membranes. But I've been trying to tell you all along, this wasn't ever my story. It wasn't the engineers either, and it wasn't even Eaton's. It was ours. Ours. We've decided to migrate after all, and the inside of your body is as dark and damp as the forest floor after a rain.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was lovely. I really hope that when your book comes out, they let you do the audiobook, because that was a lovely thing. Next up, we are going to hear from Cassandra Scherr. Cassandra is an assistant professor in the English department at St. John Fisher University. Over her 10 years of teaching, 10 plus years of teaching, Dr. Scherr has dedicated herself to encouraging imagination and critical thinking by fostering a love for art and literature in her students. Her research delves into African American literature and the creative expressions of the African diaspora, illuminating how these works harness speculative and artistic elements to tell powerful and necessary activist and community stories. Dr. Scherr champions the Black imaginary as an essential tool for activism, empowering individuals from diverse backgrounds to engage meaningfully in the social and scholarly discussions that shape our world. We're so lucky to have her here with us. Welcome, Cassandra.
Okay, so I was made clear by my introduction. I'm very much in my academic professor phase, which means to be able to introduce my story, I have to do a thing a lot of academics unfortunately do, which is give you a lecture nobody asked for. So, sorry. So what I'm going to read is a selection from a work called Dear Harriet. Dear Harriet is a series of pen pal letters written by me to Harriet Jacobs, the author of Incidents of the Life of a Slave Girl. I worked on this piece for a lot of reasons, but part of it is because of the inspiration that Jacobs had on my own life. Jacobs was a powerful woman. She was somebody born into slavery who escaped, taught herself to read and write. And for me personally, reading her autobiography was the first time that I was able to engage a conversation of what it meant to be a Black woman in America that allowed yourself to be express fears and pleasure and joy and pain. Like up until that point, everything that had been communicated to me was Black women were super serious and super strong, and our whole power was that we didn't let things get to us. And though she overcame so many things, Jacob suffered and talked about her suffering. So as a result, when I started to read her works, I would write little things in the margins. I'd write notes to her. I'd write in my journal about her, and eventually tone those into these letters, to which I will read for you today. I chose to do letters for a couple of reasons. First, because Jacob's work is actually set up to be in conversation with somebody. Originally, it was in conversation primarily with Northern white women. Like the whole point of Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. Well, there's many points, but one of them was to get the North to care about what was happening in slavery in the South. And today, it's in conversation with us. It's asking us to remember our past, thorns and all. The other reason why I am doing this as letters is because I'm engaging in a more academic speculative concept coined by Artaban Tans. He calls it pendulum time. Now, the concept behind pendulum time is that history is like a pendulum. And so our historical moments, they swing the pendulum forward at us. Our history comes forward, it shapes us, it makes our societies. And we assume that history is one way, like it's the past and it just comes at us and that's what we do. But Bonton tells us that we essentially can catch that pendulum. And by engaging and thinking about and responding and creating our own works in response to that history, we start to reframe the ways that we think about it and therefore reframe history in itself. So you start to swing the pendulum back. And in that way, you can create sort of a literary time machine that starts to have an echo effect in both periods, our modern time and this historical time, because both of them are shaping us as we interact with each other. And so today, I'm going to sort of create that literary time machine. But like a time machine, we won't really know the effects until we see how time moves forward. So I'm going to read my work, and I guess we will see what effect that this work has. And like I said, I'm going to read two letters. There's more. So the first one and the end one, sort of the bookend. Dear Harriet, I hope it's okay that I call you Harriet, although we've never been directly acquainted. I want to call you by your real name because names are powerful, and yours deserves to be known. In the same vein, I will also name your enslavers, Dr. James Marcone and Mary Mocone, because they also deserve to be recognized for their horrific actions. I hope that seeing their real names doesn't distress you. I know that you refer to them as Dr. and Mrs. Flint, and did so as a form of self-protection. Perhaps you were protecting yourself mentally as well as physically. And if that is the case, I am deeply sorry for any distress I caused. I never want to cause as harm to you, as many of the privileges I enjoy as a Black American woman were built on your intellect, sorrow, and labor, and of those activists like you. However, though many things have changed, allowing me to live an incredible life, many of those issues you face are still very much present in my life, albeit in different ways. Thus, your words have often been a light in my personal darkness. And because of that, I feel as though I know you, though our lives are almost a century apart. And through my 40 plus years of life, I've read your story many times. And I would like to think that if we had met, we'd become beloved friends. My dear Harriet, I generally wish that I could speak to you in person, though I know that wish is impossible. So I hope these letters, poor substitute as they may be, can serve as a small bridge across time and space, where we might find a meeting place to discuss those realities that weigh us down and bring us joy. I want to express my deep appreciation for you and all that you've done. Your writing has long been a space of rumination for me, and these letters are my poor attempt to express those musings. Thank you, Harriet. You're doing incredible work still. Warm regards, Cassandra. And letter 2. Dear Harriet, it hurts so much to read the way you talk about yourself when you describe your relationship with the white lawyer, Samuel Sawyers, whom you called Mr. Sands. It pains me that when you speak of yourself as a sullied woman because you bore children for him outside of marriage. Now, I understand why you do this. I know you actually wish to be married to your first lover, the free Black man who was willing to buy your freedom. He sounded like an excellent partner. And I am furious that your relationship with him was one of the many things that Dr. Norcombe stole in his attempt to coerce your consent to his advances. But your relationship with Mr. Sawyer but to me, your relationship to Mr. Sawyer was an attempt by a 16-year-old girl to take control over her life and body. I understand why this moment saddens you, but I wish you didn't feel cheapened by your body or character. Harriet, you are brave, you're clever, you're strong, and yes, you are beautiful. You deserve to make whatever choices you saw fit with your body. And though we both know the horrors of slavery stole that right from you. But even if it hadn't, there's nothing that you could have done with your body and no act that could have been done upon your body that would have lessened your value in my eyes. I am so sorry that wasn't true for the people around you. And I hate that many around me would try to dismiss you as a fallen woman as well. I, for one, am happy to know that you were able to maintain control over some aspect of your romantic and sexual life. It's the least you deserved. I'm delighted that in doing so, you were able to send a clear message to Dr. Norcombe that no matter how much he tried to frame his flattery or his actions as flattery or romance, he was nothing but disgusting predator, abuser, and rapist. He was a monster, using a horrific system to force you and other young enslaved women to endure his presence. And that acknowledgement is the least he deserves. So I, for one, am ecstatic that in a situation where he had every benefit and you had every disadvantage, you were able to outmaneuver him in such a profound way. I know your society wants you to feel deep shame for the choices you made. And I understand that any show of pride as a Black woman at the time would have resulted in more horror and pain. So please, let me use my privilege and say and do what you could not. I'm proud of you, Harriet. I'm proud of how you handled yourself in this situation. And I hope to be half as formidable when I move through my life, because you, my sister, are an icon. With loving pride, Cassandra. It's nice to
so much, Cassandra. It's lovely. Next, we are going to hear from Kristina 10, and then we will have some time for discussion and questions for our book sale. But Kristina 10, if you don't know, her stories appear in McSweeney's, the best American science fiction and fantasy, We Are Here, the best queer speculative fiction, the best weird fiction of the year, and elsewhere. She has won the McSweeney's Stephen Dixon Award for short fiction, the Subjective Chaos Kind Award, and the Friction Writing Contest. A graduate of Clarion West Writers Workshop and the University of Colorado Boulder's MFA program in fiction, 10 has received fellowships from the Ragdale Foundation and the Martha's Vineyard Institute of Creative Writing. And we are so happy to have Kristina here. Welcome.
Thank you, Tyler and Writers and Books, so much for having us. Thank you to my amazing fellow readers, and thank you all for being here today. It is that time of year in Rochester when I think we're all really craving spring break. So I'm going to take us to Myrtle Beach today. I'm going to read the first 30% or so of a story called How to Make a Snow Maiden from We're Here, Best Queer Spec Fic, and you know where to find the rest. It is a queer fairy tale retelling. Over frozen run-the-ritas in novelty yard glasses, beneath a ceiling crowded with cheeky neon-painted signs, Kira and Miriam debate what to call the opposite of a baby moon. They've been at Senior Frog since lunchtime, cycling through umbrella cocktails and orders of jalapeno poppers with queso dip, and the Myrtle Beach daze has settled over them so completely that Kira doesn't think it's remotely stupid when Miriam suggests moon baby. And when Kira throws out adult son, Miriam gives it serious, near scholarly consideration. She repeats the word back to Kira, adult son, testing its weight in her mouth, and her brow is furrowed and the center of her tongue is stained this deep purplish blue. The oversized balloon hat a waiter plopped down on her head hours ago has turned her thin blonde hair into a halo of static cling, and Kira thinks her wife has probably never looked so beautiful. Not quite so beautiful as she does right now. The reason for the rebranding of the baby moon and the intense consideration with which it's being conducted is that, well, you can't have a baby moon without the baby. It's right there in the name. Miriam told Kira so 1,000 times in 1,000 different places after the adoption agency called with the news. She told her at the library where Kira works, in the hushed tones that libraries demand, and on the train back to Roxbury, where she had to yell to be heard over the clacking of the tracks, seemed glad for the excuse to yell, to not hold back, actually. In the end, it was those places exactly, and Kira and Miriam's absolute need to get away from them that made them decide to go after all. In particular, it was their apartment, where everything had been rearranged, their bed pushed into a corner, their desks crammed in side by side. Also, the spare room could be turned into a nursery, where everything had been assembled and triple checked for sturdiness, where whole days had been lost to paint swatch comparisons, moon mist or flaxseed, lemon or dandelion. That and the plane tickets, booked months ago, turned out to be non-refundable. And honestly, the all-inclusive resort with the lazy river running through the lobby and the front desk attendant who introduced himself as the fun concierge, it worked. Because this past week, Boston has felt so far away. So impossibly, necessarily far away that Kira has begun to suspect that Myrtle Beach isn't just the farthest spiritually that you can get from Boston, but that it's the farthest spiritually that you could get from anywhere. And this is maybe the best thing about Myrtle Beach, more than its 400 plus hotels or its 60 miles of shoreline or whatever, its bald refusal to recognize that which lies beyond its limits. Even now, at Senior Frogs, on the last day of their trip, as Boston and all that awaits them there threatens to encroach on their good time, Myrtle Beach says no. Myrtle Beach says, who goes there? Myrtle Beach says happy hour starts in 20, with half-off appetizers and 2-for-1 drinks at any of the restaurants, count 'em, 5 bars. Myrtle Beach says, Noomi Bob. No, Miriam says Noomi Bob. Because this is also backwards, she says, meaning they were so close, and now they're right back where they started. And she knows these things happen sometimes. The agency said these things happen sometimes. The birth mother can decide right up until the very last minute. It's a risk, they said. It's all outlined in the contract. A risk, but a calculated one. Unlikely, but not impossible. Suddenly, the loudspeaker crackles, and with the practiced enthusiasm of a place open 365 days a year, even during that Category 3 hurricane, even on Christmas, it announces that it's officially happy hour. Thanks, Myrtle Beach. Perfect timing. Really, Myrtle Beach is turning out to be everything they hoped when they picked it over Sedona, over Santa Fe, thinking this was their chance to make up for the classic spring break they both missed out on in college. There have been oyster bars and a cappella tribute concerts at the House of Blues, motorcycle rallies, and zip lines through the tops of palm trees. That after-dark walking tour where the guide claimed drowned sailors still haunt the employees-only section of the Hard Rock Cafe. There was, too, the way the salt clung to Miriam's shoulders after a dip in the ocean. The tiny bikini she bought at one of the dozens of stores on the strip that sold tiny bikinis just because she thought it was ridiculous, the kind of thing she would never wear back home. And when Kira begged her later in the hotel room for a runway show, and Miriam obliged, it was because she wanted Kira to do that cheesy but sweet thing she sometimes does. Say her name with the emphasis on the last syllable, drawing it out extra long, like Mary Young. Now it's Sunday. They've been to the Wax Museum 3 times and the Pirates Voyage dinner show twice. They're on a first-name basis with the barista at their hotel Starbucks, and at this very moment, karaoke's in full swing on the second floor of Senior Frog's. And aren't the past and future silly things to think about when one is sitting in a chair with its back molded to look like a butt wearing polka dot bikini bottoms? Which both Kira and Miriam are. So they don't think, that is. What they do is build a frozen cocktail girl. It's a joke, mostly. A continuation of the long joke that this whole week has been. Kira watches a waiter in a red apron carry a platter full of cocktails from the bar, and her first thought is, why red? It makes her think of a butcher or a serial murderer. Her second thought has to do with the towering concoction he sets down on the table next to theirs. It's some kind of daiquiri, balls of shaved ice, violently pink, topped with whipped cream and a diced strawberry. And it could be the way the ice is stacked, or the way the strawberry slices from a certain angle look almost like a pair of parted lips. Or it could be that these days, 100% Kira's got kids on the brain. But something cuts through the stale, sticky haze of their final happy hour in Myrtle Beach. A memory from Kira's childhood. A story someone once told her. About the snow maiden, Snegurочка. When she asks Miriam if she's heard it, Miriam laughs so hard the table shakes and the little paper umbrella tips sideways out of her glass. The one about the old couple who can't have a baby, so they build one out of snow? Kind of like Jack Frost, right? Kira's pretty sure the origins of Snegurочка predate those of Jack Frost, but she's not going to go all Boston Public Library assistant librarian Copley Square branch on Miriam right now. Because right now, there's a familiar glint in Miriam's eyes, a spark that's been her signature since their days together at BU. A spark that Kira worried had gone out the moment the agency called, but that Myrtle Beach, of all places, seems to be rekindling bit by bit. A spark that Kira knows means mischief. A spark that you just know she's going to fan. Sure, she shrugs, and it works. More than one way to make a baby. She doesn't bring up what happens to Snegurочка in all the stories, and she hopes Miriam never learned the endings. Miriam stares at her wife for a long minute, using the wooden part of her paper umbrella as a toothpick. Finally, she flashes a coy smile. Well, it's faster than filing new paperwork. If you're going to order a dozen tropical drinks and dump their contents onto the table, then start sculpting those contents into the shape of your would-be daughter, the late afternoon rush at Senior Frogs is the time and place to do it. Their waiter bounces ping-pong-like between tables, too busy to notice them. There's a large group in family reunion t-shirts arguing about how many nacho platters to get for the table. There's a youth volleyball team with a tight-lipped coach trying fervently to track down a low-carb menu. There's a bachelorette party wearing matching silk sashes, and one of them's leaning over to ask another if she's sure, absolutely sure, that this is the place where the staff gives lap dances between courses. A group of frat guys stumble onto the stage, shouting the opening lines of Sweet Caroline, and every time there's feedback on the mic, a pair of fussy twins in high chairs at the back of the room begin to screech. In the middle of it all, there's Kira and Miriam, and they've set the garnishes off to the side for later, and they're trying to get the slope of her neck just right. And if anyone notices what they're up to or cares, they keep it to themselves. After all, the drinks are paid for, and Kira's tab is open, and really, is the mess they're making any worse than that of the high chair twins, who at this very moment are finger painting their trays with fat globs of ketchup? And maybe that's why the red aprons, Kira realizes. That would make sense. Empty glasses stacked by the legs of their chairs to make room, their girl stretches long and wide across the table's surface. They build her lying on her back, because they figure building her straight up, snowman style, would take a whole lot more ice, more frozen drinks than they could reasonably order. More than they should be paying for, even. There's a reason they're in Myrtle Beach and not, say, Santorini. So they build her lying down, with one blended ice arm and one blended ice leg reaching for Kira's side of the table, and the other arm and leg reaching toward Miriam. She's mostly frozen mudslides and froggy Ritas, with a pour of Bahama Mama on each cheek to give her that fruit punch flush. Her hair is sections of pineapple rind artfully pieced together, her mouth a thick orange slice, and her eyes two basil leaves, one much bigger than the other. Somewhere around where her ears might be, Miriam drapes a pair of maraschino cherries, like dangly earrings. After working in quiet concentration for half an hour, Kira and Miriam lean back from the table, up to their elbows in simple syrup and blue curacao, and survey their creation. Her unchanging expression, her mismatched, irisless, basil leaf eyes. Miriam looks at Kira, and Kira back at Miriam. Finally, Miriam whispers, "She's terrifying." The two burst out laughing. They take turns yanking napkins from the silver dispenser, starting the hard job of scrubbing the sticky mess from their hands. Balls of used napkins pile high on one corner of the table and litter their laps. But even though Kira makes a joke about how they're probably too old for this, and Miriam makes a joke about how she can't believe they're going to get kicked out of this place before the frat guys, neither of them gets up. And after the last of their embarrassed chuckles die down, both turn their gaze to the frozen girl between them. Waiting for what? Waiting for something. Maybe for the waiter to come back so they can apologize profusely, offer to clean up, to do the dishes themselves, to leave the kind of tip that says, "We just don't know what came over us." Two self-respecting women who have jobs and a Roomba and who hardly ever, we promise, play with our food. Or maybe something else. Maybe waiting for the breeze from the Atlantic to waft in through the windows and rustle one of the basil leaves, just a little, or nudge the orange slice mouth into a crooked smile. But the music blares on, and no one pays them any mind. A few tables over, their waiter is explaining to the volleyball coach about the chicken taco salad, how it's pretty low carb, he guesses, if you don't eat the taco part. And the frozen girl, she looks as lifeless as ever. Except that after a while, she does move, in a way. She melts. Which is what happens in all the Snegurочka stories, of course. The snow maiden gets hot from skipping through the forest trying to keep up with her new human friends, or she falls in love with the neighbor boy, a shepherd who warms her ice-cold heart till it's a puddle on the ground. The old couple mourns their melted daughter for the rest of their lives, which are unmercifully long, and it's not true what they say about fairy tales, that they all end happily ever after. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristina. It's lovely. I can't wait to read the rest of that story. I want to, we've got a little bit of time here to talk with our guest authors and ask some questions. I want to get us started by each of you in turn, maybe giving a recommendation or a memory of an early work of speculative fiction that meant a lot to you. I think we all, as young people, read stories that would fit into this category now that we're talking about of speculative fiction, but they probably weren't described that way when we encountered them. So I wonder if you can think back to something you read as a young reader or a young writer that really left a mark on you. I don't know if that's too hard of a question. If anyone's got like a one right off the top, go for it. And then I would love for you to make a recommendation of a recent work you've read too. Maybe we could go around twice. So yeah, cool.
Cool. Yeah, I always talk about Salman Rushdie's Haroun and the Sea of Stories, which I think is billed as like children's literature or young adult, but it's still my favorite book to this day. And I think like with speculative fiction, you'll see that whether or not something gets categorized that way has more to do with like marketing, right? Like where it gets shelved in bookstores. And Rushdie, I don't think generally is canonized that way, but his work is fascinatingly speculative and political, and Haroun and the Sea of Stories in particular deals with language, and language being just completely shot through with magic and entangled in like power structures. So it's amazing.
Can I second that? I love that book. I'll go a little further back. So I was definitely like a reader, little girl, like walking around the house with a book. And I actually still have my box set of Madeline Engel's Wrinkle in Time. So when I got the box set when I was a little girl, there were only 3. I think technically there's 5 total, but there weren't. But I got that, so in my mind it's still a trilogy. But I read all of those books more times than I can say. And what I loved about it was that there's so much about fighting evil with love and compassion for people you care about. And it made a huge mark on me as a little girl. And yeah, that's my.
I was a little older when I read this, but it is an older work. Samuel Delaney's Babel 17. I'm similar story, very much about language and about like, can language actually be utilized to even like take over or like change what someone's behavior? But beyond that, I'm also just very fascinated by the set of characters, because he worked very hard to create like these characters who like augment themselves and love in different ways, and everything is just treated as the norm. And of course, part of that was because a gay man in the 70s trying to gain acceptance, and a man of color who's also trying to build a career. But to see the ways that sort of woven through the story without saying that's what the story's about was just very fascinating to me.
When I was a kid, the Wizard of Oz books just took me away. And the idea that there were places you could go to get away from everything. And the book was literally doing that, not just getting me into it, but it was taking me all these other places. And I never wanted to be in the real world. Always in fiction, especially in science fiction.
Yeah, and then I was thinking of maybe just like in the last 5 years, any work of speculative fiction or something that you just really recommend people read. I don't know, it might be nice to touch on.
Annalee Newitz's Future of Another Timeline.
Can you say the author's name again?
Annalee Newitz. That's a time travel story. Starting with the opening epitaph is from Senator Harriet Tubman of Missouri. And it's just a wonderful look at the way the world could be.
Book poetry called by Kwiki Emezi called Content Warning Everything. There are all sorts of cool things in it, but I'm particularly interested in a series of works in it where she really engages religious figures like Jesus or Mary, but they're just members of her household. And so she's just like, so Jesus was my brother, and he just sort of like wanders in. Or like, and Mary met my mom, and they're just like on the by a river bitching about their shitty husbands. And so I think it's a very clever work, but also very emotionally real one. Content Warning Everything by Kwiki Emezi.
Yeah, I'll make up a list of these recommendations and send it out there. So, yeah.
There's a book that came out 2 years ago called In Universes by Emmett North. And I like shoved this book at everybody I can think of. It came out in a smaller press, so it didn't get as much attention, but it is a book that the main character is a physicist who is working on theories of the multiverse. And it's about her, and it's about her husband and this friend that she had when she was very young. And then each chapter is told about the same characters, but in a different multiverse, a different universe, right? A different part of the multiverse. And some of them are very similar to the first one with just some slight differences. Some of them are vastly different with different creatures and different types of worlds. And the kind of narrative arc of the book is the cumulative effect of all of those different kind of smaller stories about these same characters, where you basically see all the different choices they could make given the circumstances around them. It's so good. So yes, please look it up.
In Universes?
In Universes.
These all sound so good. Okay, well, talking about books that aren't necessarily shelved in speculative sections, but which are certainly speculative, there's a novel that came out a year or two ago called Martyr by Kaveh Akbar, who is an Iranian American poet first. I love his poetry collection, Calling a Wolf a Wolf. And Martyr, I think, is just like tremendous. It's about, what it means to be an Iranian American man living in the US today. And it's about addiction and like perception, and also this like cultural obsession with martyrdom. And though it's not shelved as like fantasy or slipstream or speculative, there are these alternating chapters that are more dreamlike, that depart from the like forward moving narrative, that put two characters from like pop culture or from the protagonist's life in conversation together. And they're like often very funny chapters. Yeah, it's a great book.
I wonder if anyone here in the audience has any questions about speculative fiction, about any of these specific stories we heard today, the writing process. Yeah.
This is Mostly, well, I was thinking about it during that last story, so I'm not trying to exclude everybody else, but the speculative element comes in kind of in a very subtle way, and that one I haven't read the rest of it already. Do you ever start a story? I guess actually all of you can answer this. Do you ever start a story and then the speculative stuff sort of weaves its way in, or do you start it? You know what I mean? Like, is it ever like?
Is it in the premise or?
Yeah, are you outlining it and you're like, okay, this is definitely a slipstream or a sci-fi or whatever, or do you just kind of get going and then you wander into Snow Maidenhood or whatever?
I love snow maidenhood as a term. People are always looking for those like marketing buzzwords like cottage core or like gremlin core for like subgenres, and I'm going to use like snow maiden core. To answer your question, I usually don't think about genre when I start. I usually will start with a line or an image, and it builds out from there, or I'll start with like a particular character facing a particular problem. So a lot of my stories, I think, like tend to start in more familiar to us places that then kind of dissolve or become displaced. It gets me into trouble sometimes because like one best practice, and it might be an old best practice by now, but like one best practice is to like set reader expectations right from the beginning. Like your first sentence should say like which planet you're on, which timeline you're in, like what like seven-headed race of alien being is the protagonist or whatever. And I don't really do that. But yeah, so I'd say this is typical of my work. What about y'all?
You mentioned outlining, Parker, and like I just had to laugh because I don't outline ever. Constitutionally incapable of outlining.
Now you have longer work.
I know.
That's cool.
It would be a lot easier if I did. I just can't. But my process is very similar to Kristina's in that what I tend to start with is either an image or a line, same thing. And so it's less for me about, is this a science fiction story? Is this a fantasy story? Is this a slipstream story? And more, it's the vibe. It's the vibe that I want to get across, honestly. And so usually that ends up coming out more slipstream than anything else. The one I read was like a rare science fiction one for me. It's usually a little bit more slipstream. But yeah, I try not to think about it at the beginning because when I do, it feels a little bit too forced for me. And I say, let's like do away with those rules of saying, you know, like make people work for it. I have no problem with that.
I don't do the same thing twice a lot. So how I come about stories is always different. Sometimes I'll start with a metaphor. I'm a scientist, so I'm a scientist. Yeah. I'm a scientist. So a lot of times I'll get with the scientific metaphor to build the story around. But other times it starts with a character. Sometimes it'll start with a premise. And so it just goes in a lot of different directions. And speaking of outlining, that story I read was first in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and Sherry Thompson said, change the ending. Don't make it end so well for him. Throw some regolith in the works. So I went back to about the 3/4 point and started throwing in some hints, and then I threw out the ending and just started writing it, and I had no idea what was going to happen. The words were just coming out of my fingers, and I wanted to see how it was going to end.
So I have a different approach, but it's because, I'll go ahead and admit it, my writing has a agenda. which is that like I'm asking people to challenge the way that we think the world as we live in, and pulling from a very Black speculative sort of rhetoric in that regard. So oftentimes I'm thinking of a problem first, and then what speculative thing or what thing would need to intervene to make this problem into a different thing, or what would we need in order for those who are using other to be able to gain enough power in the situation to even the ground. And so it's a little bit both and, if that makes sense.
Can you share any writing techniques that when you started to master these techniques, you found that was the breakthrough for you to start getting acceptances?
It's a tough question.
Revision. Unfortunately. Yeah, when I was starting out, I like in undergrad, I really stupidly believed, as you can in undergrad, that like the first draft was the purest expression of my idea. I can see y'all have also felt this way. And I just was really reluctant to revise it too much because I thought that I would like stray from like what I was really trying to say. Which I think is like a fine instinct. And what I had to learn was how to take the notes I was getting and shape them into changes that would serve my story, which sometimes means like not taking every note or taking like trying to hear the challenge someone is having with your early draft and instead of like taking their prescriptive solution, which might not be the exact right solution. But yeah, becoming really devoted to revision. I spend like at least 3 times as much time revising as I do drafting now. And that has made a huge difference in actually getting placements and with publishers.
Yeah, I would say too, yes, absolutely. Also, I think letting yourself get weird with it is the only way that I can say. So, you know, you can write a story that is a great story and nothing's wrong with it, right? And struggle to place it somewhere, struggle to find people to connect with it. And sometimes what it's missing is like, what do you want the story to be? Like, what in your deep, weird heart do you want to get out in this story? Like, and I feel like that is sometimes frightening to kind of allow that part of yourself into your work. But for me, whenever I've done so, those are the stories that people tend to relate to the most or just that connect with the most. Just be weird.
Yeah.
So take this with a grain of salt because where I am in my career right now, I am very much publishing in more academic works because I have to, or it's my job. But that said, bringing your writing to spaces of play. Like I do a lot of stuff with D&D. I do a lot of stuff with like testing the world against like, especially with like testing the world with role-playing games and other people, because you can't control those other people. Like wild things start to happen to the story, and so that is part of what I do to help me get weird. Because sometimes it is difficult to break out of our sort of boxes and spaces. And so being able to make it more playful. It also helped with that sort of, no, this is my purest form and I must respect this because they don't respect it.
Yeah.
So like, all right, cool, then anything is possible.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the 0 draft.
Yes.
Not a first draft. The first draft is what comes after the 0 draft. Just type and get the things out and don't go back and revise. And then you end up with a giant pile. And there might be some good things in that pile, and then find the good things in the pile And then it's like, okay, there's something good here. And there's something I can hang a story on this. There's people, a character or a situation or metaphor, and then I can carry that. And then I get a first draft out of that. It's a slow process. But that's what I found sometimes works.
We've got just a little bit more time, and I want to make sure we have time to sell books and get them signed. So, but I do want to close with one last question. I'm going to kind of put Cassandra on the spot if you're okay with that. I was wondering, so this is the 25th anniversary of Rochester Reads. This is a program that we do every year. We advocate for all of Rochester to read the same book. And in 2003, we had Octavia Butler come. We chose her novel Kindred, and she's the author also of Parable of this Hour, and many other books that I think are hugely influential today for speculative fiction writers, but also for the way that she made space for Black writers. And I would just love to hear you maybe talk a little bit about what you think Octavia Butler's work, what do people have to learn from it? Like, what can you learn from her work?
Okay, so there's the standard things that you want, sorry, you unlocked my trap card.
Yeah.
So there's standard things that we tell people to learn from Octavia Butler, which is this sense of like, there's never a true villain, like she never lets you hate her villains, even the most villainous of villains, like the slave owner. That life is complicated, leading with love, a lot of her works are about love. But I think one of the most important things to remember about her work is Octavia Butler never desired to be on a pedestal alone. Like her whole point was she wanted others to join her. She wouldn't be stoked if people were like, the Black speculative fiction woman author. She was hoping for a whole like party of people with her. So one thing to take from her is, right, get yourself out there. You don't have to be perfect. Octavia Butler was awkward and weird in many ways. And a lot of her writing is about the fact that she was anxious and uncomfortable with a lot of things. And writing was a way that she sort of made room for herself. So your creative works and make room for yourselves or those who you care about or those who are maybe invisible. And I think that is something that we could really take from her works.
I love that. And I should have said before, Dr. Scherr is a Octavia Butler scholar, is published on her, which is why I put her on the spot. Right? You may all have relationships with Butler's work. If anyone would like to speak to it, even just be like, yeah, I love it. I'm a fan.
Yes, I'm a fan. Yeah.